Sequence activities. This is a process of identifying and documenting relationships among all of the project activities. Up until this point, we came up with the activity list, which is a document capturing all of the work that must be done in order to create the work packages that we had on our work breakdown structure. Now we need to go ahead and take those activities and place them into that proper sequence. Now, we don't want to hyper-focus on a single work package at a time because we might have a lot of overlap. So we need to look at all of these activities in relation to all of the other activities. This is going to lead to a whole lot of analysis. We'll be introducing the precedence diagramming method, which is one of the first steps into creating the critical path method. The outputs we have are schedule network diagrams, as well as quite a number of updates to our project documents. So the precedence diagramming method. This is the first step for the critical path method. We need to build our network diagram showing the relationships between these various activities. This is also sometimes called activity on node. There's four types of PDM relationships, as you can see illustrated within the PMBOK guide on page 190. Anytime we are looking at a network diagram, anytime we are looking at these nodes in general, we always want to read it from left to right, just like we'd read anything else. As we look at an individual activity, the left side of the box is where the start point is, and the right side of the box is where the finish is. So if we look at where the arrows originate and where they terminate, we can make a determination of a finish to start versus a start to finish relationship. Since an arrow initiates in the finish side of activity A, and the arrow terminates on the start side of activity B, we can see that activity A must finish before activity B can start. This is the most common relationship that you'll see, and probably the only one that you'll have to use for your exam. There are a number of examples that we could give for this. You have to finish loading the dishwasher before you can start a wash cycle. A start to finish relationship. This is the most seldom used. This is where one thing must start before another thing is able to finish. If we use the example of a home renovation, we at least have to start framing a wall before we can finish running all the electrical wiring. Otherwise, we'd have nothing to attach it to because it'd be lacking any type of studs. A finish to finish relationship. Activity A must finish before activity B is able to finish. Everybody has to finish eating dinner before I'd be able to finish doing the dishes. I can start doing the dishes whenever I'd like, but I can't be done until everybody is done with the dishes that they have. A start-to-start relationship. One activity must start before another is able to start. So once I start setting the table, people can start serving themselves dinner. We have dependency determinations. There are different types of dependencies that you may see within your exam, and one very important aspect here I do want to point out, we do have some other names for these types of dependencies. So a mandatory dependency, it may also be called hard logic or a hard dependency. And the questions may ask you about this with absolutely no context clue whatsoever. So it is very important that you make a note that these could be used interchangeably. A mandatory dependency is mandatory. You cannot get around this. It is somehow impossible. It's going to be illegal. It's going to be in violation of a contract. There's going to be some type of physical limitation, but it just cannot be done. So if we think about that home renovation project, we are unable to paint the walls until we hang the sheetrock because we don't have anything to apply paint to. A discretionary dependency is a little bit different, also called a soft logic or a preferred dependency. This is where we have certain things that we want to do in a certain order. So if I had three activities, if I have to paint the wall, paint the ceiling, and replace the carpet in a room, the logical order to do it in is to paint the ceiling first, then paint the wall, and then replace the carpet. But there's nothing physically stopping me from changing that order. In fact, there's nothing stopping me from possibly doing all three of those activities simultaneously. However, we want to stick with our preferred order as much as possible. But if we do have to resequence tasks, these are the ones that we will be looking at. Now, with these dependencies, they could be external or they could be internal. When we talk about external dependencies, this is a reliance upon someone or something outside of the direct control of the project management team. So think about if we have to wait for a building inspector to come by and ensure that we're in compliance with whatever local codes or ordinances are present within the community. This is a little bit different than an internal dependency. This is something that we have kind of decided upon. So maybe we've made a decision that, okay, we will go ahead and do things in this way, or perhaps we build in certain lags or we use certain types of leads. With leads and lags, we have an illustration on the PMBOK guide, page 192, and we also have some great illustrations right here on this slide. So with a lead, this allows for an acceleration of a successor activity. Now we see that we do have two activities here, and we're still reading them from left to right. So the left side of the activity is the start, and the right side is the finish. So we see that this is in fact a finish to start relationship. But interestingly, the successor activity is starting before the predecessor has completed. In some situations, this is possible. Think about the example I gave you a minute ago, so far as paint the ceiling, paint the wall, and then replace the carpet. If we have to paint the ceiling and then wait 48 hours and put on a second coat, do we have to wait the 48 hours for that second coat to dry before we can start painting the walls? Not necessarily. We might be able to go ahead and get a little bit of a head start. Now, with a lag, this is something purposeful to build in a delay. It is still a finish to start relationship, but we do not want it to be an immediate start after the predecessor finishes. So like I was using in the previous example, perhaps we apply that first coat of paint, but then we want to wait 24 or 48 hours to ensure that it's dried thoroughly, and then we would go ahead and apply that second coat of paint. A project management information system is how we're going to keep track of all of these activities, and it will make scheduling substantially easier than if we try to do this analog. The project management information system is a repository where we can go ahead and compile data, information, and prepare reports. Here we see different types of stakeholders and the different types of informational needs that we need to satisfy. The senior management may only be getting executive summaries, while mid-level management, especially for the project management office, they'll be receiving directives from the senior management and they're going to have summary reports. The project team is going to be much more detailed oriented because we have to maintain the day-to-day operations of the project here. We see the interrelationship between the tracking systems, the planning systems, and going to the data storage system. The reporting system is how we will disseminate this information in accordance with our communications management plan and the identified informational needs of our stakeholders. The outputs from this process. We have our project schedule network diagram. So what is the relationship between the various activities that we have? And this will be the start point that we use later on to do our critical path method as we perform our forward and backward passes. Once we have this information, we can go back and start updating our various project documents, including activity attributes. One of the things we want to capture in those activity attributes is predecessor and successor relationships. And we also want to look at any type of dependency determinations, whether it be mandatory, discretionary, external, or internal. The assumptions log. Have we identified further assumptions, or are we starting to refine the assumptions that we already have made? We've just discussed sequencing activities. Quick learning assessment. Describe the purpose of this process in your own words. The purpose is to document the logical relationships between various project activities. What types of EEFs and OPAs will play into this process? The enterprise environmental factors include standards and regulations, work authorization systems, or project management information systems that we are required to use, while the organizational process assets could include policies and procedures, lessons learned, templates, or past project files. What types of project constraints are considered when sequencing activities? We may need to look at all types of constraints, including legal or regulatory requirements, the resource availability, any environmental issues or concerns. Give examples of leads and lags. So, an example of a lead would be starting to paint walls in one room while still hanging sheetrock in the next room. While a lag would perhaps be after pouring concrete, allowing 72 hours to ensure it has thoroughly set before we start building on top of it. Identify the four types of PDM relationships: finish to start, which is the most common, the start to finish, which is the least common, the start to start relationship, and a finish to finish relationship.